This is Digital Leaders Boardroom. In 4 sessions we will discuss how to embrace digital technology and develop your digital first strategy. Let's dive in. Hello, this is number 4 of the sequence of the Digital Leaders Boardroom, and today we're going to talk about achieving sustainable development goals via IT optimization. And that's a hard topic to crash, so to speak. As always, I will introduce my guest, and I will do that quickly, clockwise, and that is Michiel from Equinix, that's Alois, and yep, that's the 2-time CEO of the Year. We got Isabel from Dell Technologies, and we got Jeroen from Deloitte. Welcome, and let's have a great discussion on this very important topic, so to speak. But before we do that, I will try to do a little setting the scene, and I have asked Eric from Deloitte to provide us some insights, some trends on this relevant topic today. So, Eric, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Rob.
All right. So I would say, Eric, let's take it away. Share with us your insights and some trends before we start this discussion at this table.
Okay, thanks, Rob. I will start. So let's first draw a short analogy. IT is very much like the greenhouse gases that we are dealing with. Without greenhouse gases and the level that we currently have, our planet would be inhabitable to human beings. However, if we have too much, then actually the planet becomes inhabitable. IT is more or less a similar thing. Without IT, we would not be able to have our current lifestyle, but IT is also contributing to the problem. So I will discuss both sides of the medal as a starting point for the conversation on the table. So if we look at IT, I think it requires a very little introduction to discuss the positives of IT. For one, efficiency. Everybody is aware that IT has improved the efficiency in our world significantly. Without IT, it would really be impossible to order something and have it in-house within 10 minutes. That looks like a supply chain thing, but it's also driven by IT and IT in the cloud. It would never have happened. The second thing that I would like to point out is on artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is used to optimize watering of crops, fertilizing of crops, but it's also used to detect illegal and legal greenhouse gas emissions. So again, a very nice use of technology to combat climate change. The third aspect of IT is on ecosystems. If you look at what needs to happen to make this transition to a more sustainable way of living, ecosystems are going to play a major role. I will take one example, for instance, moving away from carbohydrates like gas, oil, petrol, to hydrogen. That is something that will have to be done through ecosystems. You cannot just change as a single person or a single organization. You need to work together in your ecosystem to make this happen. And IT will play a significant role in making those ecosystems change. The final one, and after 2 years of COVID, this will require very little introduction. We're used to telecommuting, working together without real travel. Before COVID, I used to travel every week. I was flying every week. And then in the past 2 years, I did not travel at all and relied completely on Teams, Zoom, and the likes, without any real impact on what I was able to achieve. So those are the positives of IT. Let's also dive a little deeper into the negatives of IT. I will highlight 3 categories of IT facts. One on energy consumption, one on the use of materials, and then finally how close we are to reaching limits or specific limits. If you look at the energy consumption of the IT industry, it's about 4.2% of the total European Union greenhouse gas emissions, which is, for reference, larger than the aviation industry and also larger than the refineries. And although IT is doing great in efficiency improvements, it is still a growing source of emissions, but the level of innovation actually makes nearly up for that. So usage of cloud is doubling, but energy consumption is only going up around 10% per year. So great innovation happening there, but still more needs to happen. The second aspect of IT is the consumption of raw materials. And just to give you a few flavor of what's going on, if you look at the amount of ground moved, so basically how much of a hole we are digging in the earth every year to contribute to our IT consumption, that is every year we are removing and moving away earth equivalent to 1.8 billion human beings. So quite a significant impact on the planet just for the use of raw materials. Then we're also approaching some limits. Probably they will be resolved by innovation, but if you look at the data storage that we expect to have in 2025, it will require 80 kilotons of neodymium, which is a rare metal, and that is about 120 times more than what we are currently using per year. So if we don't act, then basically we will reach some of the limits of what the planet is able to support on the IT side. Then moving on to summing it up. So if you look at green IT, there is IT for green. So IT is helping reduce the footprint of the business through process automation, through logistics, through collaboration. It is also helping on the transparency and reporting side through insights and controls like monitoring, reporting, stuff like that. On the other side, IT itself needs to become green itself. Infrastructure applications need to be optimized. End users need to be educated on how their use of IT is impacting the environment and what can be done to reduce that impact. So that brings me to the end of the setting the scene. I think that these provide quite a nice set of facts and things to think about and discuss on the table. So handing over to you, Rob.
Well, impressive figures and numbers, and some little worried, I would guess, at this table. But we will dive into that. Thank you, Eric. All right. So interesting. So, but let's first, Alois. We got corporate social responsibility. We got sustainability. We got even, well, you see a lot of new frames coming up, right? So how important is this part in general, so to speak, right? And without the fact that purpose-led, for example, gives another dimension to that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's super important, especially because it's undeniable. We also just heard it that we as people on the planet are making a way too big impact on the planet to be sustainable. So we have to fix it. and there are some systematic issues in the way that we charge costs and so forth. So if you, for example, if you produce goods or you ship goods, it was also just mentioned, we pay only what is the cost now, and we ignore a lot of residual costs, as you call them, right? So, for example, the pollution on the oceans, the heating of the planet, the pollution that we sometimes put into the ground, is basically we take a mortgage on the future with all of the things that we do. And I think it's a responsibility. If we are really responsible, maybe I would phrase it like that. If we are really responsible leaders, then we have the obligation to face that issue right now and to address that in sustainability goals of larger companies in one way or the other. If we don't, again, we take a mortgage on the future and we put the issues on the laps of our children. And I don't think that's responsible. So we have to do that.
Yep. And how much does it help that from a company perspective, so from a strategy perspective, that purpose-led is dominant? So you have had that experience within Numico, DSM, ExxonMobil, right?
Yeah.
Heavy on that purpose-led. Yeah. Is that making a difference then in these kind of goals?
Absolutely. So I think one of my previous CEOs said, and that was one of the most beautiful phrases I've ever heard, how can you be successful in a world that fails? I think that's a very powerful statement because that means that you only focus on your profit of this quarter, of this year, but you let the rest of the world fail. And I think you have an obligation to address that, yes.
Yep. Mr. Feike Seibesma, DSM, I got it here.
Indeed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Isabel, is this a major topic in the discussions with Dell Technology and its customers, or within Dell Technology itself?
Both. So on the one side, in our company, we actually also set our goals, the 2030 goals, where actually we do it in how we produce, how we operate, how we collaborate, but also how we work in our ecosystem with our customers. So that's on the one hand. And if you look at our customers, they expect it from us. So also to show actually and to step up there. So I can't do a deal together with a customer to help them make their IT environment more sustainable if I'm not putting something in the game as well. So it's on both sides.
Right. And if you looked into a lot of those discussions about the digital transformation at this stage, how much is this subject already incorporated in the, let's say, the bigger picture discussion about digital transformation within organizations? You, for example, as Deloitte advise.
I would say little. There are exceptions of companies, and you mentioned some of them. I think the focus currently of the digital strategy is growth and cost optimization. But as Eric clearly stated, we are running towards a barrier, and a barrier is part of the strategic mindset. Not to take away that the legislation is going to enforce us to take those responsibilities. I would hope that the people in our industry would also take the moral responsibility, and I think the Netherlands in some ways are leading, and I think in this case we can also be leading.
Right. So if you take that from an insight from Equinix, Michiel, why is this so important to get this on the agenda on behalf of Equinix, but also to have this fourth episode totally spent on this topic?
Yeah, I think part of the answer is already a little bit in all the data we heard before. It's because we are an integral part of every solution of every day we are living. That means that we as an IT sector together, so our partners, but also our employees, have to together work on innovation to make our footprint as little as possible. And that's very tough because we will, for instance, build data center, we operate data center. We do that with a lifespan of 20, 25 years. So we really have to make sure that today we build the most efficient data centers and we run them in the most sustainable way. For instance, by leveraging green energy and other things.
Right. So if you look to the current dynamics today, right? And you already give a little glimpse on this Jeroen saying, okay, we are going for growth, right? So everybody is busy with that growth perspective or that cost optimization perspective. So how important is this if you look to the fact that from the dynamics point of view, we're all busy with success or growth, is how to incorporate this. And figures shows, for an example, that sustainable IT is not even on the top 10 of the CIOs, Mr. Crafty.
Yeah, that could be, but at least what I know from my own experience, that when we did set up contracts with vendors, I think you referred already to it, then we have to have some sort of a sustainability clause in there with certain ratings or certain statements like the Dow Jones Sustainability Index or targets on energy reduction. For example, we always had that with the data centers, but also when we bought monitors or laptops, then it was part of the decision making. Because I think on one hand, IT can deliver benefits to the planet by measuring where the impact is highest and therefore focus on the efforts to reduce the impact. And as said, the other side of the medal is the energy that the IT sector itself is consuming. And there you also want to reduce it. So if you focus on both, then you try to make a win for the world, for the planet. And the negative side you also try to minimize. And you do that by making smart contracts.
Right.
Yeah.
And I trust that those negotiations or those contracts are even getting more and more difficult on these topics, right? Or would you say, no, it's logical? Right?
I think it's logical. Sometimes it can be difficult, but actually I more see it's over on the side of being it makes a lot of sense.
Right.
So if I look at like the last quarter already, especially what I see if I look into the Dutch market, especially on the side of the public sector, it's quite like in every RFP. And if you see what they ask, it's actually a very logical question to put forward.
Right. Of course, the important question here also, Jeroen, is in how may it benefit, right?
Yeah. So
in regards to optimizing.
So maybe take one step back to the question you asked me before. I think sustainability as a topic is on the strategic agenda of many businesses. I think the IT as a solution, but also as a potential problem, a sustainable by design in the digital landscape, is not on the agenda yet. Translated down in the value chain. If you look at the benefits, I think they're quite clear. The cost benefits are there. Energy consumption is rising and the costs are rising. What you also mentioned is that the commercial benefits of being a sustainable producer or a supplier of goods and services will be the norm. Therefore, leading the pack will be of a benefit in the commercial market. Attracting new talent and retaining them currently, we notice that in our company, but I think all of us do, they have a different mindset. So keeping and attracting them is very important. And let's not forget the moral benefit that we all have in our own lives, but also the lives that we pass on to our children. Yep. I think the big question is, will we wait for legislation to take over these benefits and to drive us there, or will we take the moral decision ourselves and lead the way?
Right. And how important is that in discussions within ecosystems, for example, Michiel? I trust that not everybody's on the same page, right? So you're within a ton of ecosystems, so to speak, right? As Equinix. So what does it mean for yourself in terms of managing this, or controlling this, or getting it at a minimum level you would like?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. You know, for us, it's very important to realize that we are part of that ecosystem. But to come back a little bit to your mark of only, a small percentage at this moment is putting sustainability first. I think we recognize within that ecosystem a lot of leaders that, like us, really have the intrinsic value to do the right thing. I think that's the most important thing to have. And together together with those, we actually are setting the way to a sustainable future. And I think that kind of creates a new norm, a new setting, where eventually I hope everybody will see that it's really necessary and will join us. And in that sense, I think ecosystems are slowly transforming to sustainable ecosystems. And we're very proud to be part of that with our employees and our partners.
Yep. And if you look, Alois, you are also in favor also of the dynamic ecosystems, right? So if you take that from the perspective of your, let's say, experiences, so how can you as a CEO push that? And how have you done that? For example, if you look to ExxonMobil or DSM, how did you do that? Because it's not obvious, right?
No. It's quite a complex ecosystem. So we talk easy about ecosystems, but I think one of the things that IT did to all of us is a hyper transparency. So everything is connected, people are connected, information are connected, people and information are connected. Look at all these successful platforms that is basically just connecting people that want something and people that want to deliver something. So the thing that you can do is that IT is really, because sometimes we talk about IT and the business. Well, that's already, I would say that's a fundamental mistake, because IT is part of the business. So first thing, as a CIO, you should never make that mistake anymore. We are an integral part of the business. And thus, we are also part of the solution. And if you don't do it, you're part of the problem. And if you want to be a part of the solution, it means that you are an integral part of, if a company takes, for example, the sustainability really serious, as we just said, you see that companies sometimes make not only a financial reporting of the success of the company, but also the sustainability reporting as an integral part of your responsibility as a company. Eh? So then you need to measure the impact on the planet, what you also buy, what people do with your product. So IT needs to measure that just the same way as you measure the financial performance. So you make it really an integral reporting. That's one example how you can play a role in making sure that you fulfill your obligation also on all the P's, not only profit but also the planet and people. And another thing is what you also can do is that you become an integral part of the solutions that your company sells. So, for example, if you sell a product, you can also turn it into a service. Whereby the reuse of a certain good or material becomes much higher. That's also a way to play a direct role on let's say, a more sustainable future.
Right. And probably you will have some examples of how your products and services, as for example Dell Technology, will help your customers, the CEOs in it.
Yeah, actually what Alois says is you want to have like a way that you can also buy it as a service. So just what you need and pay per use. And the moment you introduce that model, and we also work very closely with Equinix on that, is you actually help them not to overload themselves with too much technology, what is not needed. So you're more likely to actually plan for the road to success and help them to scale when it's needed. And when it's not, you're not actually producing more IT than what's purely necessary, and just make it like Zoom in your data center with having a lot of energy waste. The other thing is what we do is on the side of, while actually from a vendor perspective, you actually have, of course, this buying circle. There is also such a thing as how can we help them to be more effective from the perspective of how do I create my resources, the pools of resources? Because if you are very efficient and effective in using the resources in the right way, you're also not actually over-indexing on that. That is actually the whole secret behind cloud, of course. How can I get more out of the resources I already have in place? And the other part is how can I create the fabric, actually the way I can make sure that how it's actually steered and automated, make sure you actually have like even with AI, making sure that you use actually the best possible outcome from an energy perspective, but also from a resource perspective. And actually that will be a good use for your financial account as well. Mm-hmm. Because if you're doing it that way, you're also optimizing for that.
Yep.
So in a certain way, Jeroen, there's always that advisory part, right? But I also hear now a little bit the auditing part here, right?
Absolutely.
So that's an interesting dynamic.
It is, and it's one of the reasons that at Deloitte, but I think many of our colleague firms are investing heavily in sustainability, and from a reporting perspective, because it's required, but also in helping organizations go through the transition that is required. The legacy is not just in the lack of information, but it's also the legacy that we hold in the data centers, in the materials that we have, the devices. Doing that smart, doing that in a way that it's reportable, and is extremely important, and is gaining traction, and I think will be a very large part of the market that we address.
Right. And is that something what you also are going to see more and more in that ecosystems if you from a steering point of view, right, would expect from all your partners within the ecosystem?
Yes, very much so. I think in essence, you know, if you want to work on a sustainable future, is setting goals, and setting goals is nothing without reporting on goals and steering. So I think, you know, if you look at what we do together with our partners, we create reports, they create reports, and together we actually make that ecosystem of sustainability work. So in essence, to have really good reporting, and also that is kind of something that you have to set, you know, the first step on, because I think we're in the first stages of reporting, and the further you go together with your partners, the more you understand the total impact of everything that is needed to actually make an application work. So the further you go, the more you understand, and the more you can do to make it sustainable.
And it's actually interesting, like, because we already did, right? So if you look at the ecosystem, how we actually collaborate with Intel or Microsoft to actually make sure that how we produce our laptops or the workplace, it's actually a complete collaboration, because Microsoft wants to have like a perfect experience from their product, and we do the same. And Intel also wants to have like this best experience. So if you work together, you get this experience and you get this efficiency. You have a longer lifetime of your battery, and it's very small things. But if you do it all apart, you will not succeed. And the same is true how we actually collaborate on building a data center or working together on like big data centers. It's all about how do you create like the things, and having in mind what this data center is.
Yep. And the primary question then, of course, is everybody getting to the same agenda?
Yes.
And not their own agenda, or the hidden agenda, so to speak. But great example. But let's look how it flies, right? Let's look how it, from a development perspective, but also from an adopting perspective, looks like. I would say video.
The stigma that used to exist almost felt like you were doing something a bit naughty by working from home. But now that's just part of life. It opens up a wealth of opportunities around creative freedom. With the new work from anywhere model, there are no boundaries anymore. Most people just know us for the Formula One team, but there's so much more to McLaren. So the group has built on its expertise in racing and diversified into business technology and McLaren Automotive. With work from anywhere in collaboration with Dell Technologies, we're much more agile, we're much more iterative, and we pivot quickly and deliver benefits in a much more seamless way now. No matter where you are in the world, you feel like you're sat next to the person you're collaborating with. You're seeing the same real-time information as each other. We're a very fast-paced company, and making sure our employees have the right equipment means they can start to collaborate. If you're Formula One, you have access to the telemetry data you need. If you're in automotive and you need access to the CAD systems, that's all set up and ready to go, and you can literally start collaborating on day one. The McLaren work from anywhere literally means work from anywhere. Hey, Sam. My office is free if you want to use it.
Yep, my office look slightly different, I would say. At least I think, Alois, you would like this one. When I'm correct, previously ExxonMobil delivered the paint to McLaren.
That's great, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, that's a cool one. So let's dive into this. IT is part of the solution, and I think it's good to handle that. And but let's take it from an abstract level to start with and peel that onion a bit. Does this create new operating models in the end?
I think it has to. It has to, but it is quite difficult because we all like these ecosystems to work. But in the end, and you see some examples, but in general, you need to have trust to make it work. A lot of companies are still driven by a quarterly profit. And they want to earn as much profit as possible. Yeah, and then it's not always in line with what the rest of the ecosystem wants.
Right.
So it's difficult.
It's difficult. Jeroen, how do you look to that in regards to the discussions you have with your customers? Can you see that traction that they say, okay, let's at least figure out what it could be in return of? Is it a changing operating model?
It's I'm aligned with Alois in a way that to start something new, you need to break down or leave the past. And that's where the comfort is, that's where the security is from the responsibility of many of the businesses. The interesting thing is that I see it working from two sides. So the first thing is the ecosystem. It's a network of people, maybe even a delta plan for the market to come together, where businesses and suppliers and all other players come together and create a larger term plan for the future. But there's also a lot to be done from the operational part, the lower end. On a daily basis, renewals of technologies are on the radar. Making those choices now to work towards the future will have a large impact and makes the decision much simpler. Also, choices about not expanding the economic lifespan or the usage lifespan of the technologies which are continuously innovated is a conscious choice and will have a huge impact. We don't need to have a new phone every week or every year in that way.
Tell my kids.
Let's tell first the grown-ups and then you can deal with your kids. So I think it's a two-way street, and I think it's about conscious decisions, and it's about bold leadership, bold on the ground floor, but also bold in creating new networks.
Yeah, but if you take that from an aspect of let's say, that leapfrog or making a little bit more pace, right? So if you're not willing to change your operating model drastically in terms of old versus new, right? Mm-hmm. And I have that idea, you just referred to a quote from Feike, right? And he literally broke down a couple of business units saying, oh, we stop this, we build this new one, right? So and that's, I think, the only one to make pace, right? Mm-hmm. If you really handle that from that perspective.
Yeah.
So you need to be bold.
You need to be very bold, and I think there's one paradigm shift. Is because a lot of people think that sustainability costs you money, but you can also flip it around to say sustainability can also be your business. And if you are able to do that, it needs a lot of creativity, and I'm not sure you can do that in every sector. I just don't know. But there are sectors that are able to do that, and you need a lot of creativity, a lot of commitment, and in the end you need to be bold to take that kind of decisions, yes.
Right.
Yeah, and I think if you look at that, it's also the way you really understand the subject. So lately when I worked at KPMG, we talked a lot about data and AI, and then you see like the real thing in understanding what it really is and what it's not. It's not there in the board. Mm. So with that knowledge, you steer actually the whole community, what is below you. If you would be able to actually really understand and digest the subject sustainability, you would not actually create like a role where he or she is taking care of sustainability and the rest can go on. Mm-hmm. And I put it a little bit black and white. It's not that, but it's mostly the moment we are again forced in the quarterly review. What do we do? Then the sustainability department is going what they do, and the rest is going for this hurry they're in and forget about it. So if you would really understand it, you would not never organize it away. You would organize it in your line organization.
Right.
And understand it really well yourself.
And which trends of development into this, Jeroen, are then the most critical at this stage?
I think, looking at the technologies, I think that a cloud has momentum, has had it for a very long time. But I think there will be additional momentum because of the sustainability. A cloud combining, pooling compute power has an absolute positive effect against doing it all by ourselves. For the same reason, I'm quite skeptical of blockchain, because that has a relatively large footprint on the compute power. IoT mentioned, making all the things that we do, that we use, and where we live smart, has its impact. I think the narrative around that could be more about sustainability. It's now about cost efficiency and comfort, but it's also about sustainability, and I think that will help to drive the discussions. There's two big shifts that I see coming. The first thing is about the reporting and the requirements that we have in all the organizations and throughout the entire society, and how to get the data and make them reliable. And the second thing is sustainable by design. You do that with your products, with your services, but I think sustainable by design also starts with the users, the companies that build the data centers, the software developers that make that code, and there's a distinct idea. We've all adopted secure by design, and that has had a huge impact on enterprise architecture. I think sustainable by design will have the same impact, and it starts on the board with the principles, translated into action.
Yeah. I have one question about it. So if you talk about compute, actually what compute is actually run by data. So data is creating, and of course the algorithm are creating this compute power you need. And there was this moment in the newspaper that there was a lot of data absolutely not necessary. That was during the moment when they wanted to build the Facebook data center. What about that? Because I agree to the point where we actually over-index on the data we like to keep, because potentially there is some interesting information underneath it. So how do we do that? So how do you advise on that?
I'm not sure it's my place to advise on that, but I think you touch upon a point that if the supply of not only compute power but also storage is endless,
yeah,
and it can be built relatively quickly, the big challenge is how to get the demand, or keep the demand in check. And that's a technical solution. There's processes behind it, but there's also a responsibility and a cultural shift required for us to do that. As individuals, do I need all these pictures and the thousands which didn't make, but I can keep them because it's cheap. But it's also about organizations where there is a minimum requirement to keep the data, but there's no maximum.
No, that is really interesting.
But I think we all know the answer to this discussion already, because there is an unstoppable desire of a human being to be connected to information and to other people, right? If you see, if kids can get a phone, they're hooked, they're gone, basically. They are into the bubble with their iPhone. Or it's in work not very much different, to be honest. People like to be connected to information. The desire for more feedback, because the way I look at the world is everything is like a mini control system. You want something, you have a result, and then you have a feedback loop to see, am I there or not? It's the same if you hit the shower in the morning. Your body checks, I like this temperature or not, and then you make an adaptation. It's a control system. In fact, IT is doing that all day long for everybody, even for children. They want to know, where are my friends, what are they doing, why I'm not doing that, and so forth and so forth. So the hunger for data and the hunger for information, the hunger for connectiveness will only explode, because there are still a lot of people on this planet that also want to have that. So I think it's very safe to say this will only get crazier. and we will never have the patience to clean up
But the problem
ethic.
is the data.
Well,
Yeah.
I think also the problem is that you don't attribute the right value, because what you see in those kind of things, it's for free, and for free I think everybody wants to have everything. That's very logical. As soon as you price it right, then people will start thinking about it, and when we make different decisions. So I think the reporting, the accounting on what the real costs are, the sustainable costs, the long-term costs behind those kind of things are very important to really see the right cost.
I'm not so sure, because maybe you're right. I'm just not sure, because if you look at, for example, there was also this, when people really want something, it's very hard to get rid of it, right? Take, for example, people said, okay, if we let people pay so much for gasoline, people will get out of the car. No, the price has never been so high, and we have never had so many cars in the Netherlands. The same is true for smoking. Smoking is bad. We have, I don't know how, it's super expensive. People keep on smoking. So I think the same is for data. We are addicted to that, just like
There
driving.
can't be a trend break?
Well,
Because
I
I also see, so I had this free email address. I don't mention the company. But then I wanted to get rid of all my emails. I thought, let's take it away. And then I got this message underneath my screen. Why would you actually get rid of it while it's for free? So there you create...
That's a good payoff. That's a good payoff. But what I hear in the discussion is that a new threat coming up, that we need to do some data or information rationalization because of shortages of in the future?
Yeah, and I still think pricing, it's very expensive to have data, even if it's sitting there in data centers very remote. It still costs energy, it still costs materials, etc., etc. So I think pricing might not be the ultimate goal, because people do crave things. I agree with that. But I think in the more rational business environment, it will really be a big thing when things are really being accounted for at the right cost.
Yeah, but you see, I think you're in the right spot to answer on that. You see, of course, new requirements on, let's say, the core infrastructure, right? But if this piles up, right, that makes you, to a certain point, that you will hit Moore's law, so to speak, right? So what do you foresee in those trends, in those new requirements for at least that core infrastructure, and how to incorporate all those trends, all those hypes?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I think on the one hand, there's so much, you talked about IoT, we talk about efficiency, we talk about all those applications that actually help the world to improve in terms of sustainability. So we need more capacity. And until now, we are still finding new and different ways to actually, use Moore's law to not only, increase our capacity, but also to make it more efficient. So I think that will continue. I think the other part of the discussion we just had is, are all those things effective? And what we do is, that host of other things that are not effective. But that's more like a moral question. I think we have to answer all together ourselves. And I think hopefully it's becoming a little bit more fashionable to have a little bit more, of a moral conscience in the decisions you make, in the things you are doing.
And that would be my point. I agree with you that the demand will rise. Let's not forget that's where the discussion started. Technology is also part of our solution. With all the data and analytics and the IoT, we are more efficient. We can be more productive without increasing our energy food sustain. Not to leave out that understanding what the real issue is and making the right decisions also comes from that technology. I think. I would applaud making decisions if we know it's going to grow and it will continue to grow, is that we do it in a sustainable way, as sustainable as possible that we currently know, as companies, maybe as parents, also as human beings, but also make that part of our mindset. As you said, the moral responsibility is something that adults can take, but maybe also the children. It's their planets that we leave.
I think, very important is because we feel it as a person. We would like to work with companies that are responsible, and I think companies are increasingly getting responsible as well. And I think the most important thing, is that we start today, because we can debate it until we are, becoming more responsible. But let's start today. There's so much to do today in our IT environment that we should do.
So the future limits are not the technical limits, but the moral limits.
In a sense, I think there are boundless opportunities where we can work together today to really make an impact. And I think we all understand if we want to reach those 20 and 2030 goals, if we don't start today, we won't be able to reach them. Yeah, we have to start today.
But if you grasp at moral limits, right? So if we take that to the next level, and I think that's an interesting one, because that all has to do with leadership, right? So both from the top, but also perhaps from bottom up, right? If you want to work for the company A, B, or C, yes or no. So if we look to those stretch, and we would say, I guess that it is important if you want to have a different Earth, and everyone still keep living and connecting, and etc. So what does it mean in terms of leadership? So how? It's easy to say, okay, I buy a kilo sustainable IT, or I change some processes. But if you really look to the change itself, right? We see it in digital transformation already, right? It's so hard to adapt change within organizations from a culture perspective. So, and this is an extra layer, I would guess, right? So how do you see that from a leadership perspective, Alois?
Yeah, I think as a company, you always fight in an ecosystem. You have competitors. And if you are the only one that is taking a very hard choice, which makes, for example, whereby you include the residual impact you make on this planet into your pricing, for example, because you want to charge the real price of a product to your customers, and you're the only one that do that, you have a very short life. Then you are being brilliant, but very alone. And some people call that then a lunatic. But if you are able to create followers, then suddenly that person with a brilliant idea is no longer a lunatic, but you have followers, and then suddenly you are a brilliant leader. And there are multiple ways on how to do that. For example, if you form an alliance with your competitors to say, look, let's do this, it's better for all of us. Now, and if that works, that's great. Another way to do that is, for example, also influence the politics around it. To say, for example, if you take CO2 emissions, you try to convince the political environment to say, let's make sure that you charge for that. So charging can have an impact, but it needs to be big enough for people to overcome that, because in some cases people will not do that naturally. So that's where the politics and the business and the population needs to collaborate. So that's a super ecosystem, but that's what you need, and that's what you can do as a leader.
Right. So in how much, Jeroen, does this will be a new setting of that technology, economy and society is getting much more interacted with each other to develop these kind of goals into a better world?
Yes, maybe to make the analogy with our recent or maybe even current COVID crisis. A feedback that we got from clients that were reassessing their strategy in those times. They said within, let's say, the last 10 months, I've achieved more than in the last 10 years to make the big decisions about the way that we work, the way that we produce, etc. That could be, or hopefully will be, the same reason for this topic. So make it part of the strategy in the boardroom, and not just as a side note, but as part in the core of the strategy, and trickle it down in all the decisions that you make in the production methods and the support functions and in the culture of your people. You mentioned the examples of DSM. I'm not personally involved in DSM, but that's a cultural thing that goes from the top to the bottom, the coffee to the high value products that they make. from procurement in making the right decisions, and it's supported all the way up. And I think that's the strategic shift that we all make. And I think that at this table, but in our ecosystem and the people that we influence, that's a movement. And then all of a sudden, it's not just one company, but it's a whole industry. Right. I strongly believe in that, but it needs to be. It's about bold decision making. It's about managing that change and supporting that change.
So what steps do we still need to make, Michiel, in this case, to become that true leaders, or as organization, or as yourself in your role?
Well, I think that urgency and purpose is the first step we all have to take, and think in a lot of large companies and with our partners, etc. I think they already took that step. So I think it's there, and it's there because it's the right thing to do. I think the second step, which is very important, is don't look too far. Look at your employees, look at your partners, look at your customers, and start the conversation, because that's where it really starts. And we partner with, for instance, Dell, but also our customers. For instance, the Dutch government, where we reduced their data center number from 64 to 4. So there are many opportunities to really start working with your partners, with your customers, and most important, with your employees, to go in that way. And I don't know where we end up in 2025 and 30, but let's start today with actions.
Right. So you have to seduce, so to speak, your customers, but also your employee.
I think you have to find the right customers which already have that urgency. That's where we work together with them. And I think the rest will follow because of the leadership we have in the global digital infrastructure.
Right. And Isabel, if you would take that...
Can I add a point to that? Because its discussion is also about communication. And communication is not just about the great stuff that we do, and that's marketing, so to say. It's also about the struggles and the boundaries that we face, and having those discussions, because that will help us forward. And it's not just about making us look green.
No,
in that sense.
It's the learning together.
It's a learning.
That's the journey we have to embark on.
Especially in the younger generations, that makes a difference. We can't all put our money into the right decisions, because there are some things that are holding us back. The lifespan of a company is very slow if you do everything in the right moral way. Right. But it's the journey that makes sense, and it's the open discussion that will bring us forward.
Right. If you would like, Isabel, if I would ask you is, what should your colleagues as leaders of tech firms do or don't at this stage right now?
I think we need to be more in connection. So it's like what Alois said, if you are just the only one, you feel potentially that you are like taking a risk. If you talk to each other, you feel that you all have the same goal you're working towards, and you can be more strong in how you actually present and evangelize that message always to your customers. And the second is that if you look from a society perspective, it's also, if you look at the new generation, and then we go back to where Alois started, it's all about, if you really look at what is important, and also now in COVID time, things are a little bit more shaky, and then it comes down to actually more sustainable way of living, doing business, etc. So I think we have a real momentum now. People are more nice towards each other and nice in the business, while they feel their business is also shaky potentially.
Right.
So you need each other much more in that open dialogue.
Right. Thanks, Alois, with all your expertise as a two-time CEO of the Year, and I've seen a ton of companies with some great purpose-led discussions. Could you hit the camera saying to your colleagues, CIOs, CDOs, CTOs, come on guys, this is the golden bullet for today?
Okay, that's a nice question, Rob, thanks. And a very subtle introduction, I like that. Well, if I have to say a few words, then what I would do is use IT where it's meant for. That is to connect people, to connect information, and to connect information with information, to get the full purpose what IT can do. It can create clarity, it can create competitiveness, it can create connectivity. And if you put that in the right direction, then we can achieve a lot more with IT than we have done so far. And in this case, aim it also to drive the sustainability agenda, not only of your own company, but of your whole ecosystem where you are in. That would be it.
Well, thank you. Jeroen, to wrap it up, What are the biggest takeaways from this discussion for you?
For me, I think we all agree that technology and IT has a net positive impact on sustainability and all the sustainability goals. I think we all understand the risks that we are facing. Part of it is for the right way, the exponential growth. Part of it is also something that we need to take on responsibility. I think the market understands it. All parties and the government understand it. So let's take our responsibilities and let's do it together. So the ecosystem play is something that I would very much advocate for.
Right. So you see, ladies and gentlemen, it's about the ecosystem. It's about getting it done. It's about use the full potential. And it's about perhaps a starting point from an abstract way is get that really purpose-led discussion also within your, not only your organization, but within your ecosystem, within, well, let's say your dynamics of the market you would like to acquire or require. So for now, those are 4 sessions you have been seeing on the Digital Leaders Boardroom. And for now, I would say, stay safe, stay healthy.
Every connection, every link, every purchase, every update, download, trade, refresh. Every yes, I'm still watching, and turn left here. Equinix is everywhere. As the world's digital infrastructure company, we connect places, partners, and possibilities. They all come together on Platform Equinix. Harnessed by the world's digital leaders, our global interconnected ecosystem is ready to power your success. With a physical and virtual infrastructure that adapts as your business transforms, you can unlock new opportunities and stay secure and connected across the most dynamic industries. You lead the way, we cut the lag. No buffer between start here and go anywhere. And with every leap forward, we look ahead to do better, in service to our communities, to our team, and to our customers. Together, we enable the innovations that enrich our work, life, and planet. Equinix.